Alrighty, folks, I'm at it with the third installment of the five greatest players in respective franchises NBA history. This one is the Brooklyn/New Jersey Nets. Yes, I'm counting both Brooklyn and New Jersey from the NBA as part of the Nets franchise history. And for those of you, this is your first time watching one of these five greatest players series, I do have the playlist. I'll put the link to it in the comments. If you guys want to check out all of them, they go in alphabetical order by city. And another thing I'm doing to make this a little more interesting is I can only use a certain player one time. So I can only use LeBron James one time in this. I can only use Shaquille O'Neal one time. That's going to make things a little more interesting when we get to teams like the Lakers, Magic, Heat, Cavs. But with that being said, this one is about the Brooklyn/New Jersey Nets. Let's dive right into it. So there's certain players for this, like Kevin Durant will not be on here because I'm using him for another team. But just part of the fun aspect of it for me. Some of you guys might like it, some of you maybe not so much. But let's dive right into it. Start off with a few honorable mentions for the New Jersey/Brooklyn Nets. I'm going to start off actually with Drazen Petrovic. He was with the Nets for a few years. After he got sent packing from the Blazers, it looked like he was ready to break out and become that first European superstar. His game had improved a little bit each year, but unfortunately he died over in Germany in the summer of '93, and we never got to see Petrovic break out and to become that guy. So that was a real shame there, but for the time he was with the Nets, he showed promise and he showed that he could potentially be the star of the future. Another one, though, is Richard Jefferson from those early 2000s New Jersey Nets teams alongside Jason Kidd, Kenyon Martin that went to back-to-back NBA Finals. He was never an all-star, but he was a good role player throughout his career. But he's a role player who's mainly remembered, in my mind, for his time with the Nets. Yes, he also was a role player in those 2016 Cavs, but I mainly remember him as a Net. So he's getting an honorable mention there. So now I dropped a few honorable mentions. Let's move on to the main list, starting with number 5. I'm actually going to go with Brook Lopez. Now, Brook Lopez, he was taken out of Stanford in the 2008 draft with the number 10th pick. Now, he didn't make any all-star teams, but he was one easily during that transition phase from New Jersey to Brooklyn when the Nets were a dumpster fire. Kidd was gone. Vince Carter was gone. All those guys left. All they really had as far as notable players was Brook Lopez. And that one year they tried to go all in, get Jason Terry, Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett. They got past they got past the Bulls in the opening round, then they lost in the second round to the Heat. Brook Lopez was also a key part of that team in making as far as they did throughout the regular season. So he was a key piece to that as well. And even the year before when they got to the playoffs but lost to the Bulls in 2013 in the opening round, Brook Lopez was the guy that kept that team together. So he deserves an honorable mention because I think he was a bit underrated. It's a shame he didn't get on a better team sooner, but he did his best he could to keep the Nets relevant. He did help play a role in them getting to the playoffs a few times. So he definitely deserves a nod on this one. And now moving on to the number 4 spot, I'm going to go Kenyon Martin Sr. He was with the Nets in the early 2000s. He was number 1 pick in the 2000 NBA draft out of Cincinnati. He played a role in those 2 finals appearances along with someone else who's going to appear on this list. He did make an all-star team in 2004 as a member of the Nets. And he was the number 2 guy behind those back-to-back conference championship wins 2002 and 2003. Kenyon Martin was their go-to big man on that team. And he certainly was a key factor in those finals appearances. Now moving on to number 3. Number 3, I'm going to bring in Derrick Coleman. It's going to be an interesting one. Now, Derrick Coleman, he was taken in 1990 as a number. He was taken early, was it 1990? But yeah, 1990. He was the Rookie of the Year. He was a 2-time All-Star as a Net. He was later with my team, the Sixers, but he's mainly remembered for his days with the Nets. His best years came with the Nets, and he helped play a role in keeping the Nets a relevant team in the early 90s. They did make a couple playoff pushes behind them. They only got to the second round, but they did at least make, they at least kept that team competitive, in their post-Buck Williams days and their post-Dr. J, so on and so forth, in the early 90s. And he was a key cornerstone keeping that Nets team relevant in the early portion of the decade. Now we move on to number 2. I'm going to go with Buck Williams from the early 80s. He was taken the third, 1981 from Maryland. He was a 3-time All-Star with the Nets. He also won Rookie of the Year. He was one of the main players that's primarily remembered as a New Jersey/Brooklyn Net through their franchise's history. He kind of helped keep the team relevant there in the early 80s into the beginning phases of the Bird-Johnson era. Even though the Nets only got to a certain point, they could never get over the hump, but without Buck Williams, they would have been much worse off in that era. So I got to consider him star. He was averaging over 20 points per game, which in that era, it was more common. Like nowadays, it's more 30, 40, but back then, averaging over 20 was good in that era. And Buck Williams consistently did that during his time with the Nets. So he was one of the best offensive players in the East for his era, and most certainly deserving of a nod. Now this gets to me to number 1. The leader behind the back-to-back finals appearances I've alluded to throughout the video, and that's Jason Kidd. He started with the Nets that 01-02 season. He was traded from the Suns when the Nets decided Stephon Marbury wasn't the answer that was going to get them over the hump in the long term. And Jason Kidd, at that point, the former Maverick, former Sun, multi-time All-Star, came in and took over the Nets. Year 1, they went from below average to making the finals. Now, part of that was that the Eastern Conference was weak at the time, but still, to go from not making the playoffs and being considered an underachieving team to making the finals with one person coming in, taking charge of the team, and that being Jason Kidd taking charge on the court, that's a significant accomplishment no matter what. And Jason Kidd, he was that guy. He had great all-around game, high basketball IQ, was great with assists, rebounds. Now, he wasn't the greatest scorer in the world. He could still put up buckets in his peak, but he was just a great all-around player, and he had great basketball IQ, and that played a significant role in improving that Nets team right away. We talk about how sometimes, like the Chris Paul effect, how it helped the Clippers out. Well, back in the early 2000s, it was the Jason Kidd effect for the New Jersey, now Brooklyn Nets. They made it to the finals first year there. They made it back the second year. They were still in contention. They were still in the playoffs for years to come when Kidd was still there. So Jason Kidd certainly, that is shadow of a doubt to me, the greatest New Jersey/Brooklyn Net in their franchise's history. And it's not even close. But that's my list. You guys can comment, let me know your list of your 5 greatest New Jersey/Brooklyn Nets of all time. Make sure to drop a like and subscribe for more all-time greatest players lists. Until next time, it's your boy Nicky Stees signing off. Peace.